Long before the rise of Islam, Arabia was a land consumed by war. The vast desert, with its endless dunes and scorching heat, was not an empty wilderness, but a battlefield where blood had been spilled for generations. Tribes clashed not just for land, but for honor, water, and the right to survive. A single insult could spark a war that lasted decades. Feuds ran deep, and revenge was a duty passed from father to son. There was no central authority, no king to enforce order, only strength dictated power, and the weak were destined to perish. The sword ruled the land, and peace was nothing more than a temporary pause between conflicts. Among these warring tribes was the Quraysh, the dominant power in Mecca. They were not warriors in the traditional sense. They were merchants, traders who amassed wealth through commerce rather than conquest. But wealth brought influence, and influence required protection. The Quraysh held Mecca, a city that was more than just a trading hub. It was a sacred center, home to the Kaaba, a revered sanctuary that drew pilgrims from every corner of Arabia. To control Mecca was to control the spiritual and economic lifeline of the region, and the Quraysh guarded their position fiercely, making sure no rival could challenge their dominance. It was into this world of shifting alliances and blood-soaked rivalries that a child was born in the year 570 AD. His name was Muhammad. Orphaned at an early age, he was raised by his uncle, Abu Talib, one of the Quraysh's most respected leaders. From childhood, Muhammad witnessed the realities of tribal warfare. He saw how men were killed over water rights, how caravans were attacked and looted, how entire villages were burned to settle old grudges. War was not just fought on the battlefield, but in politics, in whispered deals and fragile alliances. He understood early that survival required more than just a strong sword. It required intelligence, patience, and the ability to navigate the ever-changing landscape of power. As a young man, Muhammad traveled across Arabia as a merchant, leading trade caravans through hostile lands. These journeys exposed him to the ways of other civilizations, the disciplined armies of Byzantium, the military strategies of the Persians, the fortresses of Yemen. He saw firsthand how war was fought beyond the chaotic skirmishes of the desert tribes. He was not yet a warrior, but he was learning, observing, understanding. The lessons of leadership, negotiation, and strategy took root long before he would ever step onto a battlefield. By the time he reached the age of 40, Muhammad's life changed forever. He claimed to have received divine revelations, calling for the end of idol worship and the belief in one true God. His message was simple, yet radical. In a world where power was determined by lineage and wealth, he preached that all men were equal before God. This was more than just a religious doctrine. It was a direct threat to the Quraysh. If people abandoned the idols of the Kaaba, Mecca's economy would collapse. If all men were equal, the elite would lose their grip on power. The Quraysh saw not just a preacher, but a revolutionary who could upend the foundations of their rule. The response was swift and brutal. Muhammad and his followers were harassed, beaten, tortured. Some were killed. Trade with his supporters was cut off. Starvation loomed. The Quraysh were determined to break him, to silence his message before it could spread any further. But they underestimated him. Muhammad endured. His followers, though small in number, refused to abandon their beliefs, even in the face of death. When the situation became unbearable, Muhammad made a bold decision. He would leave Mecca. In 622 AD, he and his followers fled to Yathrib, later known as Medina. But this was not just an escape, it was a tactical move, a shift in the battlefield. Unlike Mecca, which was ruled by a single, powerful elite, Medina was fractured, divided among feuding tribes. The city was unstable, on the brink of collapse from internal conflicts. Its leaders saw Muhammad not as an enemy, but as a man who could bring order. They invited him to Medina, offering him and his people safety. Muhammad did not just accept, he seized the opportunity. He became more than a prophet. He became a political leader, a strategist, a man who now had a base from which to operate. But Medina was not a place of peace. The tribes of the city distrusted one another, and external threats loomed from all sides. The Quraysh in Mecca were enraged. They had expected Muhammad to fade into obscurity, to be crushed by exile. Instead, he had found allies, built a following, and established a new center of power. Reports from travelers brought unsettling news. His numbers were growing. His influence was spreading. This could not be allowed. The Quraysh prepared for war. Muhammad, whether he had planned for it or not, would soon find himself on the battlefield. For the first time in his life, Muhammad faced a war not of words, but of weapons. He was no longer just a preacher calling for faith. He was now a leader of men, a commander responsible for the survival of his people. The Quraysh were coming. The war had begun, and there was no turning back. He had no standing army, no experienced warriors, only a group of believers who had never fought a true battle. But he had one advantage: faith in his cause and the ability to lead men with conviction. The coming battles would not only decide his fate, but the future of Arabia itself. The first test would be the Battle of Badr, a battle in which a small force of ill-equipped followers would face the might of the Quraysh army. It would be a battle that would change everything, a moment where the fate of Islam hung in the balance. In the next episode, we will witness Muhammad's transformation from a leader into a warrior as he prepares for his first major battle, where strategy, courage, and faith will collide in one of the most pivotal moments in history.